Good morning, church family and friends. My name is Miranda, for those of you who don't know me, and today I am doing our video devotional for Acts 27. So if you have been with us this month of August reading Acts, then you would know that at this point in our story, we pick up with Paul and some other prisoners being transferred to Rome to stand trial in front of Caesar himself. And what we find in chapter 27 is that they are put on a ship and are getting ready to sail, and Paul kind of goes to them and he says, hey guys, this isn't really a great idea. This isn't the best time to go on an adventure. He explains to them that if they continue on their journey via ship, that they are probably going to lose the ship as well as some lives as well. And the man in charge, the centurion Julian, he decided that he wasn't going to listen to Paul, that instead he was going to listen to the people at the harbor and the ship owner. And so they set sail, and they do in fact encounter some hurricane-like force winds. And when that happens, they start, like most people probably do in storms, they start trying to shed off those things that are kind of inhibiting them from continuing on through the storm. And so they start casting out the heavy furniture, they start throwing things overboard, but eventually they get to the point where there's kind of not a lot else that they can do. And so, it's a scary time for them. And Paul again comes to them and he says, listen guys, last night I was visited by an angel of the Lord, and he said, do not be afraid. You are to stand trial in Rome, and you are going to be doing that. And so we have nothing to be afraid of. And so then they kind of devise this plan to get ashore as safely as possible. And so they spent many days trying to kind of come along the shore. I don't know much about sailing, so the terms don't resonate with me very much. But all that to be said, they were able to kind of weigh some anchors down and run into kind of a sandbar before they get to the shore. And then they just slowly started to work their way to where there would be some safety. And once they kind of got to that semi-safe place, Paul instructed them we should eat because we haven't eaten in many days, and we need to do that if we are to survive. And then we pick up, and so shortly after, after they eat, they ate as much as they could, and then they tossed off all of the extras. And so again, they're just still getting rid of all of the excess things, and they cut loose the anchors because they saw a place where maybe they could just kind of like funnel the ship in. And so they cut the anchors, but when they did that, they were then pushed into a sandbar. And it says in here that the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow, that's a boat. The bow struck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. And so it's exactly like Paul had said, that our ship is going to be torn to pieces, and that is exactly what they started to see happening. And the best part of our story comes at the very end of Acts 27 when we see God's promise to Paul again just come to fruition of, don't be afraid. You're going to Rome and you don't need to be fearful. And we see that because in verse 42, it says, the soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life, and they kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone got to land safely. So all 276 of them were able to get to land safety because of the promise that God had made to Paul. And we see that over and over, that fulfillment of God's promise to Paul. Sorry, guys. We have someone here and the dog is freaking out. And so, sorry. So we see this over and over in God's promises to Paul. And when we, Andrew earlier, Drew this week, he kind of spoke about how how things were tough in Paul's life, and how God just constantly saw him through trial after trial after trial, and how when we are having trials of our own, that God does see us through those things, and we can look back on those times in our life and we can see the hand of God in them so very clearly. And we get to celebrate in those things that he has brought us out from, just like Paul did. And they became such a huge part of Paul's story, just like ours gets to become such a huge part of our story. And this is just another moment that God has just covered his protection over Paul. And so when we're encountering storms in our life, like Paul and his travelers did, it's so important to be able to look back to those moments of God fulfilling his promises in our life, so that we can draw comfort from those times and know that even though we're in such a storm right now, God has us in his hands and he is in control. And with him, we do not need to be afraid, because our story is already written and he is at the center of that, and he is going to see us through it one way or another. And so while Paul probably wasn't planning on being shipwrecked, and while, we don't ever necessarily want these storms in our life to happen, when they do, we get to just write another chapter of our story with Jesus. And we get to use those chapters in our story to tell other people about how faithful and good God truly is. So, wherever you find yourself today, just take that moment and thank God for his faithfulness, and rest assured that he will deliver you from this storm. Thanks so much, guys.